All right, welcome to the video on percent yield. We are going to take what we've learned about converting from grams to moles and moles to grams using a balanced equation and come up with what we call a percent yield. Okay, what you've been calculating it is a theoretical yield, okay, meaning that is the amount of product that you would expect, the maximum amount for when you have a reactant and based on its coefficients in a balanced equation. However, when you actually perform this reaction in the lab, you end up with less than the maximum amount of product that you would predict. Okay, so what you've been learning to do is to predict. So look at a balanced equation, and in the last video we converted from grams of the reactant to moles of the product to grams of the product. So if you haven't gotten that, you may want to go back and look at that video. Okay, and so once you've converted, you are coming up with what's called a theoretical yield. Okay, and so that's what on paper you would expect to produce. Okay, so after if we have a chemical reaction and we convert from grams to moles to grams of our product based upon some balanced equation, okay, then that mass that you wrote down on paper and calculated, that was your theoretical yield, how much you theoretically would produce. Okay, the actual yield is how much you actually obtained that you isolated from a reaction. So this is like being in the lab. Okay. So if you had a reaction of ethylene and water to form ethanol, okay, so we could write that equation out if we wanted to, and we calculated the theoretical yield by going from grams to moles to grams. We calculated it to be 23 grams. So that's the maximum amount of product we could form. Okay, but if we're in the lab and I only get 15 grams, okay, this is my actual. So this is my actual yield that I got in the lab. This is my theoretical. To find what's called a percent yield, this is very important. So most any chemists, when they run reactions, at the end they will report their percent yield. So this is really how efficient or how well did the reaction work. Okay, keep in mind this is a percentage. It cannot be over 100%. Okay, that's not possible. It's always going to be less than 100%. I mean, most reactions are not going to be 100%. I mean, maybe even 99.9. Okay, but there's always room for some amount of experimental error. Okay, so to get a percent yield, you take actual over theoretical times 100. So here we have 15 is our actual divided by 23 times 100. And so we get 65%. So our percent yield for this reaction would be 65%. Okay, if you accidentally swap these, okay, you're going to get a number over 100%. So that right away should tell you that you did something wrong, that you need to change those around. Okay, so based upon your calculations that we've learned to do, grams to moles to grams, we can come up with theoretical yields, and then we can come up with a percent yield based upon how much we actually obtain in the lab. And so if you're not in the lab and you're just working homework problems or any other problems from a book or whatnot, you're going to have to be given that actual yield in the problem. Okay? Otherwise, obviously, you have to go to a lab to figure out your actual yield. Okay? And so most labs in these general courses, you will do this. You will find your actual and then find your percent. But if you're just working problems, okay, look for that actual yield in the problem. Okay, and then plug it in and you get your percent yield.